Hi, Ask an RDC here, and in this video, we'll be going over military pay. Now, this table here shows basics of military pay, going over each pay grade. So some things you can notice here, for example, if an E1, it only takes 9 months to get to E1 to E2. So E1 under 4 months under down here, it doesn't show anything for 2 years or more, zeroed out because you won't be. You automatically promoted. From E1 to E2, it's 9 months automatic. E2 to E3, it's 9 months automatic. And then E3 to E4, after 6 months, you're eligible to get promoted. So you still have to take the test and get promoted from there. So as you can see here, this is the whole pay chart of everything throughout the year. For this we can calculate how much you're going to get paid. Now, keep in mind, this is before taxes. So this is something you can look at if you're looking to go either just enlisted or if you're looking to go up here more so for officer. And then O1, O2, O3E, this is where if you're enlisted and then you go officer. And then warrant officers is what we talked about in another video before. So this can be kind of confusing to look at, and it can be something that it's difficult to say how much you're actually get paid, because it doesn't show actually everything. This actually just shows your base pay, just your normal paycheck you'll get just for your pay grade. There's other ways you can be looking at things as well. So if we go over to here, which is on military.com, and there's quite a few websites that actually have this, and all it does is it takes this and then it puts it into a little program for you to be able to figure out what you're doing. So, for example, look at active duty, or because we're looking at active duty for this situation, but of course, put whatever you think you're going to be going for. Then we go into pay grade. So, say for starting off E1, and let's say 2 or less, because it's E1, 2 or less. So here it brings it out to you and breaks it all down. You got your base pay. We'll go over allowance and special pay in a second. Then we have your total pay, and for monthly, and what you'll get annually, and what a paycheck is. So you get paid on the 1st and the 15th. You get this is your normal paycheck, and that's what you can see for when you look at the calculator. And what it is it just takes your one paycheck, splits it in half, and then you get it on the 1st and the 15th. So allowances, right? So we start talking about allowances. So let's start looking at zip codes. Let's say, for example, you're in Illinois. So that is 60088, which is Illinois. That's where you go to boot camp, right, for the Navy. And let's say you are married or you have a dependent at the very least. So that would mean that you would get a housing allowance because of dependents. Now, you can get housing allowance without dependents. You automatically get it at E5 over 5 years in, or sometimes if you're E5 or junior with less than 5 years in, you can also get it as well if it's for, say, military housing that they're trying to make it so you don't live on the ship kind of a situation. Doing it a lot right now, at the very least, I could say in Norfolk. They're going through this thing where they don't want people living in the yards on the barge, and they want people to live out in town. But if you're, E5 and junior, and you don't apply for BAH or don't automatically get it because you don't have any dependents, they'll let you go out and they'll submit a request and allow you to get BAH so you can go live out in town and pay your rent. But with that being said, you have here, you're an E1. Let's say, for example, in this situation here, you're getting BAH because you're married. So while you're in boot camp, you'll be getting $3,802 monthly, $4,500 annually, and each paycheck is going to be $1,900. And that's on the 1st and the 15th. Once again, keep in mind, this is before taxes. Another thing you'll get is subsistence for allowance. So this is BAS, basics allowance for subsistence, and this is like the money they give you for food. So you can see it goes up a little bit more. So looking at these, when you go to a ship, they'll take away most of this, by the way, your BAS. That's just because you'll be eating on the ship. For enlisted, that is, they'll be taking this money away. For officers, they just pay for the meals that they eat. But for enlisted, they take this away while you're on a ship, and then when you're on shore duty, you pretty much get 100% of it. The one thing that you do need to notice, though, is your allowances, which is the tab we're on right now, right? So first we go to basic pay. So we get rid of all these allowances and go back to our basic pay. This is what your taxable income is for an E1, it's $23,011. All this other stuff here, when we start adding all this other stuff in, this is not taxable. Like when you go to file your taxes and you get your W-2 form on MyPay, which is the website we utilize to check our paychecks, then you'll only be taxed on your basic pay, your base pay, in short. Your allowances don't get taxed, which is great. There's a lot of things also that come in line with that. So there are certain things that you won't qualify for If they were to take in your basic pay and your allowance, they would say, oh, you make too much. You don't qualify for FAFSA or child care center or free child care center or stuff like that you're trying to get into. Or WIC if you have a kid, which definitely use WIC. If they were to look at your allowances, they would say you make too much, but they won't. They'll only look at your base pay. So they won't see that you make $50,000 a year. They'll sit there and say you make $23,000 a year, and that's assuming, for example, like WIC, right? That's what it's like a extra pay stubs you get through the government assisted to help pay for like baby formula, and it's literally these like pre-made checks for baby formula, right? So they look at it at $23,000. So if you're married and you have a kid, and at that point you might be the solo income at this situation, we're not taking into account that your spouse is working with you. We're assuming that you're the solo income in this situation. $23,000 is not enough for a household of 3. But of course, like I said, you won't be paying that much. You'll be paying this much. So moving on, you can use this. This is just for Illinois, by the way. Your BAH 1884 for Illinois. That's pretty decent. And once again, this is E1 BAH. For example, let's say you're an E6, you're first class. Your BAH now goes up to 2337. But this is also with dependents. So let's say you're an E6, you're automatically getting BAH, right? And you don't have any dependents. You're single and you don't have a spouse or kids. Well, then it goes down to 1779. So it is going to change depending if you have dependents. But the one thing that won't change is your BAS. That's not going to change whether or not you have dependents. It only changes if you have dependents for your BAH. There's other allowances as well. So we're talking here, we talk clothing allowance, right? So clothing allowance you'll get at certain commands. For example, while I was in RDC, I got an additional clothing allowance, but it was not in this necessarily a monthly payment. So I'm not going to put it in here, but that also helps out depending how much you're going to do or get for that. As you can see, it's changing the numbers over here. So family separation pay. So that's where if you are being deployed or you end up getting geo bachelors or geographical bachelor, which means that you went somewhere but you couldn't bring your spouse and or dependents. So then you'll start getting that as well. And that's $250 a month. Not really worth it. I mean, it's money, right? Why not take it? But at the same time, it kind of sucks that you're not getting. That's how much they're paying you to be away from your family. But in reality, they're actually paying you all of this to be with your family. And on top of that, we're actually having changed something. So we're looking here. So we have active duty E6, 2 years or less. Not really likely. I think the quickest you can make E6 is about 6 years. So now it changed up to 78,000 a year instead of I think I had 2 or less. So right, 69. It really doesn't change that much when it comes to that. Oops. Oh, sorry, over 8. So you did notice though it was a huge leap when I went to over 8. That's just because 2 years or less E6. That is something that could happen. There are special rates for that. For example, musicians or MUs. Those are people that I had a recruit that was an MU, right? And as soon as they graduated, they were an E6. So 2 years or less E6 does exist. And the reason being is because they were actually already like either they had some sort of degree in this or they're like a professional. I think one of them was a professional violinist and they were already working in an orchestra and getting paid a lot of money. And they got scouted and they said, hey, come join the military and be in the military, in the Navy band, and we'll make you an E6. And they accepted, So as soon as they graduated boot camp, on the day of graduation, they were an E6. So this is what they were looking at, assuming they got BAH with dependents. They had a family, then they were getting automatically nearly $70,000 a year. Once again, before taxes. This is all still before taxes. So moving on, you got special pay, and there are a lot of special pays. If we select Navy here, diver, combat, EOD tech diver, demolition pay. Definitely this is like a lot of the special warfare kind of things. Hardship, so hazard pay crew member if you're in a situation where you're going to be around hazardous environments. Hostile fire pay, so that's those that are up forward. Jump pay, master diver, these are all special kind of qualifications. Sea pay, so this is something everyone gets when they're on a sea command. So you do sea pay, and then you notice this thing here, it says select years of sea duty. So as you go through, so let's say 1 or less, and so how much did we get? Special paycheck, so it's additional $135 a month. So this is I'm going to go back and forth on this one for a second because there's a big deal about that. So you go over 2, $160. Now here's the big one. So you go over 3, $350. Much bigger, from $135 to $160 to $350. That's a 3-year kicker is what it's called. And it's an additional $200 on top of what they normally would give you for the increase. So over 4, And this is consecutive years at sea, by the way. So 375. So the big kicker was from year 2 to year 3, right? Went from 160 to 350, and now this is an additional $25. This is consecutive years at sea. Now, that doesn't mean that your ship needs to be out and on deployment. This just means that you have to be at a sea command. So, for example, my ship is in the yards right now, but I'm still getting sea pay. And there are some shore duty commands, actually, they'll pay you sea pay. It means usually like those shore commands are something like ATG, which is a technical support service that these sailors are subject matter experts working with civilian tech reps as well. And they'll come on board a ship and they'll either do an inspection or help you out with something. And sometimes they get underway with you a lot. So they'll end up getting sea pay. Not all of them. Some of them do, though. But yeah, there's a lot of different things in here. These are the ones that you would get for whatever the situation is. For one of them being sea pay, or you could have arduous duty pay, which is what you get as an RDC. You get them for a couple of different things as well. So that brings down to the summary. So this is an active duty. This is what we have selected, right? Active duty E6, 2 years or less, with nearly $3,000 a month, which is not much, but that's also with that being the fact they have 2 years or less. Basic allowance for housing, and once again, this is specifically for Great Lakes and Illinois area. BAS, $453, and then sea pay. So obviously they're not going to get sea pay if they're going to be in Illinois. We're just using it for this situation. So if you have a duty station or somewhere you think you're going to be going to, so let's say for example you had a year's worth of school, and you're an E2, right? So you're E2, and so 2 years or less. So let's say we change it to 92136. This is for San Diego, for the naval base in San Diego, right? So your BAH is now $3,600 a month compared to 60088, which is Illinois. We enter that in 1884. Once again, this is for an E2, 2 years or less, and we're going with that you have dependents. So your dependent being that you're married. So if you were married, they can claim as your dependents, even if they have their own job or whatsoever. If you're in the military, claim your spouse as your dependent. It also makes it easier for taxes as well, and also it helps with TRICARE. But yeah, doing it with dependents is 1884. So let's say you're someone who just joined, you're married, and then you went to your first duty station. This is what you get paid. At least this is what you get paid in boot camp. And then if you were to go to San Diego, it'd obviously be the $3,600. Hopefully that helps with any questions you have about military pay. If you have any other questions, leave in the comments below. Hooyah Navy.